I'm Petra from Fruition Seeds, and I have a few things to mention to you about cucurbits. And cucurbits are cucumbers, of course, but also watermelons, cantaloupes, winter squash, summer squash, all things that vine and have spines, and we eat the fruits. And so here are a couple things to keep in mind. You'll notice that this is in a container. Cucurbits hate growing in containers. They're very hungry. They need tons of nutrients, so the more soil they have, the better off they are. And they also don't like to play with others generally. They have long vines, they have lots of little spines, and so they really need a part of the garden unto themselves. In a container, they're just going to be sad. Even in a small raised bed, they can very quickly outcompete other crops. So growing them in a container really isn't an option. However, there are dwarf cucumbers that are remarkably quality in containers. Instead of having long trailing 5-foot vines, they'll have 2-foot vines. So here are a couple of varieties. The Space Master is a great variety. As you might know by its name, it's also a fantastic variety from Cornell University, just down the road. And this bush pickle is, of course, a little pickling cucumber that is a marvelous one for containers. Other than that, don't think of cucurbits as growing in containers. And direct sow your cucurbits. They hate being transplanted. Be sure to tuck them in these lovely little peat pots. If you absolutely have to transplant them, be sure to transplant the entire peat pot under the ground, and not let any of that uppermost peat pot show, so that it won't dry out and then create this dry shell of a peat pot, preventing the plant from exploring the soil around it. You can also succession sow some cucurbits, but only some of them. So winter squash, watermelons, you want to plant those all at once. After last frost, think once you're planting your basil, once you're planting your tomatoes, you just plant those once and you're done. But things like cucumbers, summer squash, those cucurbits you can actually plant multiple times. And I recommend planting them 3 to 4 weeks away from each other. You can sometimes get 3 successions in, but at the very least I recommend planting them in the beginning of June, maybe late May, and then again in late June, beginning of July. And that way, as the first fruit comes on and you're getting all of that abundance, it starts to taper, and then as it's tapering, that second succession comes on and is fully delicious. And it's really important, especially in these crops, that things like disease resistance is part of that second succession. So something like Success PM summer squash is resistant to powdery mildew, and that powdery mildew and downy mildew are the 2 biggest diseases that we contend with in cucurbits, certainly at a home garden scale here in the Northeast. So starting with seeds that have natural innate capacity to be resilient with those diseases present is the best way to ensure that you'll have your cake and eat it too, or your cucumber and eat it too. Have a great season and keep in touch.